Watching the live broadcast of Earth's military leader, who was young, the Galactic Council sat in their chilly metallic chamber. Despite being under 30, she was already well known among the stars for being a superb tactician, and she led her team with the Council's unshakable confidence in outwitting alien forces that had tried to breach Earth's defenses. Hazalong believed that Earth was an annoyance and that the species was too young to pose a serious threat. But the human captain was different. They could no longer overlook tactical warfare prowess. Thus, they prepared the assassin squad member. "This person will be our last test," the council instructed in a calm but urgent voice. And the goal was obvious: destroy the hope of Earth's resistance by eliminating the captain. The council had been using lower-level mercenaries to kill human leaders for years, but this time their attempts were unsuccessful. Nonetheless, they would employ their top assassins, who were skilled in dealing with the galaxy's most deadly targets. Because the choice was made quickly, the team was flawless and had never missed a kill. Assassins on board the disguised ship started their journey through the galaxy, bound directly for Earth. They were a mix of species that were all chosen for their lethal abilities. With a cold, calculating leader, she had the ideal balance of stealth. Because the extraterrestrial has previously encountered similar tasks, the rest of the team blindly followed her example of accuracy and deadly force, aiming for their target, Captain Elena. Torres had only received the most basic facts because her role in the destiny of the galaxy was too significant to contemplate. The council understood her daily routine and had enough information about her to follow her around, allowing her to live. Her favorite spots and those closest to her were all meticulously intended to guarantee a clean and quick assassination. There would be no survival. As they got closer to Earth, the planet's lush landscapes and blue oceans appeared to be surprises. Irrelevant, just another world in the huge universe that was ready for conquest. However, the assassins weren't ready to deal with a major variable like the captain's resilience. The commander had a brief moment of doubt, but it was swiftly put out of his mind. This was similar to 4 of their other missions. The squad's infiltration of Earth's atmosphere was the only thing that counted. They landed covertly, evading radar and satellites with cloaking technology. Their armaments are located far from human civilization, in a remote area of the planet. Since Advanced and Silent were made for precise killings, each team member was an expert in their field, used to breaking into strongly guarded facilities. But when they started to travel to their target's location, a Serpent officer was on the ground before they arrived. They had underestimated the captain, and her military headquarters was encircled by more people, so a feeling of anxiety descended upon them. It was a fortress with more than just basic security, and the team walked in silence. As Earth's troops patrolled the area, the leader watched from the shadows, anticipating that the facility would be lightly protected. But it was a well-prepared and equipped area, and the more they looked, the more they understood they had overlooked something in their calculations. The captain's presence persisted beyond the physical limitations. There, she exuded a tangible feeling of authority rather than conceit, simply another leader to be destroyed. But this one was unique among the assassins. They had previously worked with warlords, generals, and commanders, but none had ever shown such unwavering resolve. That Torres exuded. The commander hesitated for a second before shaking off the uneasiness they couldn't ignore at this point. They had to finish the assignment precisely, so they followed her movements as they got closer to the captain's quarters. The crew was positioned with their weapons drawn for the precise moment she would be alone. The leader's pulse rate stayed steady as she got ready to issue the command, which would be another standard procedure. They had performed the task innumerable times before the captain struck them with a single, quick blow. Would be no more. The leader observed through the window inside, where the captain was sitting, and the atmosphere was tense. She appeared composed and almost serene as she reviewed mission reports at her desk. Unaware of the danger that loomed, the crew was ready to break through the door when the leader did something unexpected. Observed a faint change in the captain's stance, a change that was hardly noticeable, yet signaled awareness. Could it be that she had already manifested their existence, making it impossible to second-guess? The team raced in with their rifles lifted as the leader signaled for the door to be blown open. But before they could even take a step, the captain moved surprisingly quickly, tossing her chair back in a single motion. She triggered a protective mechanism concealed in the room's walls, and a shockwave erupted throughout the space. The leader temporarily confused the assassins, who had not anticipated this. She was startled, but but soon recovered her calm. The others weren't as fortunate. The captain was already moving when one of the assassins was flung across the room, his weapon rendered useless in the confusion. Using the misunderstanding to her advantage, she quickly demonstrated that her training was unlike anything the group had ever experienced. Using a vicious sequence of blows, the squad rendered 2 of their members unconscious and immobilized, fading. The assassins were supposed to regroup, but the captain, possessing the advantage, she was battling with a determination that was beyond merely surviving. The leader paused for a second, wondering whether this had all been a trap. But there was more than they had anticipated. There was no room for uncertainty as the captain's gaze met hers. And at that precise instant, the leader came to the understanding that the objective had already failed, and that the captain was the hunter, not the prey. They had misjudged her in the worst way, and it was too late to turn around. It was like a kick to the belly. The remaining assassins made their move, but one by one, they defeated the leader, leaving them with no other option except to fight or die. Lunged at the captain in a frantic attempt to save the mission, but the captain's answer was quick and lethal. With a few exact moves, the task was completed and the leader's life was terminated. The Galactic Council's well-crafted strategy was strengthened by the captain's resolve as she stood over the fallen assassins. Had been destroyed in an instant, the human had demonstrated that they should not be taken lightly, and Captain Elena Torres had demonstrated that she was an enemy unlike any other, even when facing the galaxy's most deadly assassins. The captain didn't only survive because the Council had made a deadly error, she retaliated fiercely, giving Earth yet another justification to oppose the MS. As the assassins approached Earth, their covered ships cut through the emptiness within. The crew maneuvered with practiced accuracy. Prioritizing the mission ahead, the leader was an extraterrestrial whose species was renowned for their unmatched lethality and stealth. Examined the human captain's tactical readouts. There wouldn't be any surprises because of the captain's routines, habits, and security precautions. This time, the objective was simple: infiltrate, kill, and O. The leader squad was composed of the best assassins the galaxy had to offer. Therefore, it had always been that easy. Each of them is an expert in their industry, who was selected based on their success managing risky tasks. In innumerable missions around the galaxy, eliminating adversaries far more powerful than Earth's inhabitants, the consequences of their actions erroneously frightened. However, according to several stories, the captain possessed an exceptional capacity to predict the movements of her adversaries, was caused her to be hazardous, but not dangerous enough to warrant serious worry. When their ship entered the atmosphere, the squad deployed, and they were more than competent of handling such a threat. The leader's keen eyes examined the area below from their hiding headquarters, moving like shadows, noting the subtle anomalies in human military activity patterns. Earth security was rustic by their standards, yet effective enough to temporarily stall any onslaught. The commander rejected the notion that time was a luxury they wouldn't need to go near the area where the captain was thought to be stationed, at a well-guarded military base. Down on Earth's surface, there was a hum of excitement, but because of the technologies at their disposal, the leader routinely repressed any feeling. It was much better than anything Earth could produce, and the captain would be dead in a matter of minutes. There was an edge to the operation that the leader couldn't completely remove, and something didn't feel quite right. The humans had expected them in earlier battles, but this time the captain was the one targeted. Crew had received a comprehensive briefing, and the commander had faith in her squad, but as they approached the ramp, the atmosphere changed as they got closer to the facility. The captain was no longer only a soldier, but a leader who had transformed the tides of war on multiple occasions. This person's intellect was capable of surpassing that of even the most experienced generals in their species that the assassins had slain in the past, but none were as similar to her as it. It dawned on the leader that they could have underestimated her, couldn't afford to believe that their self-confidence was the only thing keeping them alive in their line of work. The leader shoved aside the group as they approached their goal. Misgivings, the task was straightforward as usual: locate the captain, take her life, and disappear without a trace, reaching the compound's boundary with their cloaking gadgets operating without a hitch. The crew easily snuck by the on-duty guards, who were not aware of their presence. The leader's eyes flicked over the sensors, cameras, and security measures. Human technology is still crude. Effective, disabling them would take a bit, but they were experienced and had done everything before. There was no time for doubt, because this was just another job. As they proceeded farther inside the facility, they had the impression that their target was waiting inside. The leader's keen hearing picked up a faint hum that is hardly audible emanating from within. The leader hesitated, since the direction of the captain's quarters wasn't correct. The team's signal to stop the hum was too accurate to be a malfunction as well. The group remained hushed and attentive, and the leader sensed it once more. A barely noticeable change in the atmosphere alerted the captain to their approach. How they shifted their cloaks perfectly, but the commander couldn't have noticed them, preventing them from being detected by human sensors. But the leader's senses warned that something was off. The door was closed when they arrived at the captain's location, but their specialized equipment quickly handled it, and as soon as the door opened, the leaders became twisted with a feeling of dread. There was no way out of it now. As they had anticipated, the captain was sat alone, but she showed no signs of dread or terror. Her stance at her desk was calm, but there was something unnerving about her attitude. Her eyes darted to the door as the team entered her, as though she had been waiting for them the entire time. Countenance composed, almost aware that the commander paused for a second before. The captain moved more quickly than anticipated after a brief moment of doubt. The commander hardly had time to respond before the room surrounding them changed, setting off something concealed within. Following a burst of pressure that drove the assassins reeling, a blinding flash filled the chamber. The captain had already moved to a central location with her inner ability to trigger warnings. The leader's mind raced as she somehow anticipated them and knew they were approaching, attempting to comprehend how impossible it was. This wasn't merely luck. It was... The assassins swiftly regained their ground thanks to careful planning, but the element of surprise had vanished, and the captain exhibited horrifying precision in retaliating against their initial move. She wasn't some unsuspecting military officer waiting for a swift death. She was a strategist and commander who understood exactly what was required. The leader's thoughts raced to survive against insurmountable odds. But there was no time. The captain was already on the mission, which needed to be finished for analysis. Every move was intentional, and every hit was delivered with such speed and intensity that it caught the assassins off guard. They intended to assassinate or incapacitate the leader, but they couldn't help but see how serious the situation was. They had anticipated a swift, clean murder from this human, but the captain was more than just a soldier. Completely, the leader shouted commands in an attempt to recover command of the situation. When the team moved to engage, the captain was always one step ahead of them, easily navigating the assassins. They were competent, but they weren't ready for this. The leader's thoughts were racing, but it was too late. The strategy had not worked. They had been outsmarted, and now they were battling for their life. And the captain's cunning strategy had reversed what should have been a straightforward trade. The crew was struggling, the assassination had turned into a nightmare, and the leader felt the blow. Icy clutch of uncertainty whether the mission fails or if they survive fully. The captain had already demonstrated that she could manage their best efforts, and the commander had no option but to reorganize in order to battle for survival. The goal was now to escape alive rather than to succeed. The fight for survival had started, and the deadly and proficient assassins had been taken by surprise. The skipper swiftly evaluated the situation and concentrated on their next course of action. Wasn't merely protecting herself. She was attacking with purpose and accuracy, taking advantage of every flaw in the team. Their initial edge had vanished in a flash, and they were now frantically trying to adjust to the sudden intensity of the struggle. The leader yelled commands in an attempt to take back command of the mission, but the captain wasn't like any enemy they had encountered before, and the commotion just made it more difficult to concentrate. She wasn't merely responding, rather, she was anticipating every move they made and countering them before they could even attack. This was not your typical soldier. Rather, it was a strategist who had engaged and defeated much more powerful troops. Trying to find any shortcomings in their strategy, my mind raced, but there were none. Although assassins were taught to deal with such circumstances, the captain had already shown a degree of surprising intelligence. They never anticipated the leader's confidence to falter due to their foresight and alertness. However, she pushed the idea from her mind right away, because she had successfully conducted operations in innumerable dangerous worlds. This was the same as the previous one, with the exception that the opponent was more prepared. They had previously been ready and had been successful. This time would be no exception. They had to endure a brief lull in the battle, which gave the commander time to believe the captain was erratic. However, they still had the chance to change the course if they could render her incapable of carrying out the job. All they required to win was one piece of technology: knowledge and firepower. Clean Strike had one chance to overwhelm her, but the captain had already demonstrated that she would not let it. That chance, the captain's. Every movement was premeditated and a reaction to their own, and the leader saw that the captain was dictating the terms and directing the battle's course. But it was more than simply physical prowess. It involved intelligence and strategy. The leader muttered a curse because they had planned for everything but this, and it wasn't intended to happen. She had misjudged the human captain, and they were now suffering the price as the squad's size was declining. The captain's ruthless tactics had already cost the commander 2 of her best agents, each killed in an instant. However, the others were finding it difficult to keep up and were becoming disorganized due to the captain's constant attacks. It was a test of endurance, and the leader was the only one who could outlast the others. Realized they were running out of time and that their chances of surviving the leader's attack decreased with the length of the battle. They could still win, thoughts raced, but only if they altered their strategy. The captain's reactions were too prompt and well-timed to be solely reactionary. They had to outsmart her and figure out a strategy to win the battle by anticipating their every action. But how? Then it dawned on her that the captain's greatest strength was her poise, which was the one thing they hadn't taken into account. Unwavering faith. What if they were able to undermine that? What if they were able to coerce her into a circumstance where her self-assurance turned into a vulnerability? The leader looked at the other agents they were facing. Although it was unlikely, it was their only option. Wounded, disoriented, but yet capable. By signaling for a retreat, the leader was taking a calculated risk. They could reassemble, reevaluate, and maybe attack more precisely, so the captain wouldn't anticipate a retreat. They would be perceived as the ones in charge, the predators. But this tactical retreat was a trap, ideal circumstance to lure the captain into a delusion of security and trick her into believing they were invasive. The crew retreated permanently, as seen by the leader's narrowed eyes and the captain's response, which told them everything. Keeping up the appearance of chaos while feigning to go away in defeat. The captain, according to pattern, but the leader was aware that they were now in charge, their game. All they had to do was wait for the ideal time for the plan to come to pass. As the captain advanced swiftly, she was unable to observe the minute changes in the surroundings. The captain's whole attention was on her, since assassins had set up the trap during their retreat. Foes, her instinct to get rid of them took precedence over all else. It was a classic error, one that the leader had predicted would snap shut as soon as the captain entered the kill zone. But as the captain entered the kill zone, the leader couldn't get rid of the feeling that something wasn't right, and the captain was playing along, so he drew closer. However, she showed no signs of trepidation or overconfidence, having slipped into their trap, but she was fighting with purpose rather than desperation. This wasn't an easy fight. However, before they could attack, the captain had already changed her approach and outwitted them. The commander saw that the captain wasn't merely responding to their actions. Rather, she was directing them in this direction. Every action they took in the final moments leading up to their inevitable defeat was a part of a larger plan. One they hadn't even discovered that the captain had never really been the prey until it was too late. She had been the hunter the entire time, but the leader had failed the objective. Observed the rapid elimination of the remaining assassins, each of whom was outclassed by the captain's relentless strikes. The leader's mind was racing for a solution, but they had underestimated the captain. Therefore, there was no escape. In every manner conceivable, and now they would have to pay for it when the leader collapsed. It dawned to everyone that the human captain had triumphed, not by brute force or superior weaponry, but by the Galactic Council had taken a decision based on intelligent strategy and an unwavering determination. Serious mistake to believe that Earth's defenders could be destroyed so quickly and that they would now have to deal with the repercussions. The leader could see the mission was evaporating with every second that went by. Her mind was racing, trying to figure out what to do next, but there were none left. Every move they made, every choice they made, and Captain Relentless's pursuit had entirely reversed the situation. Been expected, The assassins had taken great satisfaction in their flexibility to stay one step ahead of their adversaries. But it was certain now that the skipper had outplayed them this time, had never been the target. She had been putting them to the test right from the beginning, and every one of their attacks had been a well-planned move. The leader's heart fell, since they had overlooked the wider picture in her grander plan. To comprehend the captain's actual character. She wasn't merely a soldier. She was a strategist, an expert in deceit and deception. She had established the tone from the starting to entice them and give them the impression that they were still in charge. Retrenchment was the only option left, but it was too late. There would be no escape. The assassins were dispersed, and the leader had given up the mode. The remaining squad members and seasoned agents were in disorder, and their weapons were insufficient to the point. They had already lost a battle of wills, but the captain's quickness and accuracy caused the leader's mind to suddenly concentrate. There had to be another way for her to die, but as she received Jesus, it was evident from the cold truth that they had misjudged the human captain. And now, they were bearing the consequences of the plan's failure, which was not due to a lack of ability on their part, but rather to recognize the character of their adversary, and the captain had outwitted them by applying her knowledge of their strategies against. The squad was struggling because she had taken their best qualities and made them into liabilities. Once so certain of her superiority, the leader's movements were erratic and desperate. She was now on the defensive because the captain's attacks were methodical and well-planned, leaving no space for gaps. Every mistake was quickly corrected. There were no surprises or hidden costs. The captain had already predicted their every move with the team's morale, so they had flaws they could take advantage of. Collapsing, the leader realized there was no need in carrying on the battle because her men were not prepared to flee. Despite being taught to kill, they suddenly had no choice in the face of overwhelming odds. They decided that leaving to reassemble and attempt to salvage was their greatest chance of surviving. The leader realized that the captain had already sealed their destiny, thus they knew that the operation was over. And the knowledge that trying to flee would only result in more deaths struck her like a burden. It wasn't, simply put, they had failed because they had miscalculated their chances from the start and never stood a chance. The captain, whose plans were predicated on presumptions that the captain had destroyed in a single, since there was no backup, the leader's assumption that this mission would be like any other was a crucial mistake. The operation was a total disaster. There would be no reinforcements, and the cosmic failed. The leader's thoughts shifted to the council, but those distant people would never realize the full scope of their error. The entities who sent her and her team on this mission had carefully considered all the dangers, resources, and timing, but they hadn't taken into consideration the tenacity of every single person. She had directed numerous successful missions, but they hadn't taken into consideration the captain's brilliance or the leader's impaired vision. She had always trusted the intelligence collected and never questioned the mission, but this time, that trust had failed her. The reason the operation failed was not a lack of resources or expertise, but rather a failure to recognize the captain, because she was an enemy, unlike any other. She wasn't merely as a human warrior, she represented the transformation of Earth, and the Galactic Council had long undervalued humanity, believing they were a sign of things to come, weak, disorganized, and divided. But the captain had disproved them by demonstrating that regardless of time and place, the human spirit could not be crushed so quickly, know of how outnumbered or outmatched they were. And Baylor had to come to terms with this. The remaining assassins started to retreat when they realized that Earth was not the simple target they had thought it would be. However, it was too late because the captain had demonstrated that despite insurmountable odds, people could not be disabled. The leader was vanquished, and she saw the final member of her crew go disabled. Since they had failed, fate had sealed that there would be no escape and no second chances. There was ultimately no way to avoid the repercussions. It wasn't the weapons, the technology, or the preparation. The captain's unwavering determination to survive was what ultimately decided the mission's outcome. And ultimately, that was what distinguished her from the assassins, who depended on accuracy and cunning. The captain depended on something far stronger, her unwavering resolve. As the leader's last thought was to acknowledge the human captain's brilliance at that precise moment, realized that understanding the opponent and outwitting them was more important than simply defeating them. She had turned their own strategies against the captain at every point. Them, and the leader's last reflection as the light faded, was one of resentful regard for the one who had defeated them. The leader's thoughts were racing as they realized that the operation had failed due to their conceit. The human they were dispatched to was ultimately destroyed by their supremacy and the notion that the commander would be easy prey. Eliminate had entirely reversed the situation, leaving them with little choice and the assassins dispersed and out of time. The captain was a force not to be taken lightly, as they struggled to get their bearings in the face of a much more formidable opponent. Only in direct combat, but she had changed their strategy by guiding them into this position against them, taking advantage of every weakness in their strategy, and every action they had taken had been predicted and precisely countered. The leader was forced to acknowledge that the captain was not ordinary. Target was a strategist and an expert at deceit and manipulation, had examined them as thoroughly as they had, and now they were being held accountable for their overconfidence. The team's chaos was evident, and the previously cohesive group had devolved into a collection of individuals, attempting to adjust to a scenario for which they were unprepared during their training, had never taken into consideration an adversary like Az. Every choice was suddenly life or death, and there was no space for error. The mission was lost, the captain was invincible, and the leader had no illusions left. The more the leader considered it, the more evident it was that they had undervalued the human spirit. The Galactic Council had assumed that Earth was weak, and that its defenders were merely simple, easily outclassed troops. But the captain demonstrated that she was everything they hadn't. Hands curled into fists, the commander anticipated a force not to be undervalued, having been brought here to defeat in order to eliminate any human threat. But instead, they had come across something they had never seen previously. Tenacity. As the last killers were eliminated one by one, the leader attempted to save what little was left of the assassins. They possessed the greatest weapons, training, and technology for the mission, but it didn't matter. Nothing could weaken the captain's resolve, which was a weapon in and of itself. She was in charge of this circumstance. The leader was able to manipulate it with a brilliance that the assassins couldn't match with each passing instant. As the inevitable approached, the captain fought not just to stay alive, but also to make sure that her adversaries would never undervalue humanity once more. The assassins had not succeeded in their goal, and now they would have to deal with the repercussions. They had already set the trap and walked, therefore there was no way out. The leader plunged headfirst into what seemed like an eternity of the mission's last moments. They were so sure that their goal would be successful that their thoughts were a whirl of sorrow and realization. However, everything had fallen apart because they had overlooked the one factor. That is, they had underestimated the captains. They thought that because of her knowledge and tenacity, she would collapse like everyone else. But instead, she accomplished the unimaginable by outwitting them and putting them in a situation where they were condemned to be the leader from the beginning. When faced with the end, there was simply icy acceptance and no resentment or rage. The reason for the mission's failure was not that they were outmatched, but the captain was a tactical genius who played the long game because they had never comprehended their opponent, their advantages and disadvantages. She had done what no one else could have done. She had used her intellect to defeat them. As the leader's vision became hazy, and in the last glimmer of consciousness, there was no greater victory. It became apparent that the captain was protecting more than just Earth. Through her triumph, she had made sure that humanity would not be remembered as a minor detail in the history of the galaxy. Those who believed themselves superior would not wipe out Earth. The assassins had come to destroy a single target, but they had unintentionally allowed humanity to demonstrate its superiority. Darkness swept across the leader's thoughts, bringing with it the knowledge that the captain had not only won this battle but this world of men. Every conflict that would arise after the leader's last thought was one of deference to human. Because the captain had lived, she had ensured Earth's future.